Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking through the headlines with Fleet Street Fox and Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the Deputy Political Editor of HuffPost UK, Owen Bennett. So good evening to both of you. So let's see then what's on the front pages. And the FT reports that Brussels has rejected UK proposals on how to govern the City of London's access to the European market after Brexit. Meanwhile, the Eye leads with the confusion around food security and imports as Brexit negotiations stall. While the Daily Express features a piece about the evil acid attack which injured a 3-year-old child shopping with his family at Worcester during the weekend. And the Metro's front page also has that story, as does The Guardian. Meanwhile, Britain has secretly abandoned its blanket opposition to the death penalty to allow 2 accused members of the Beatles group of ISIL terrorists to be sent to America. That's according to the Daily Telegraph. And the Daily Star reports that Britain is about to become hotter than the beach resort town Acapulco on Mexico's Pacific coast, with temperatures set to hit a new July record of 38 degrees Celsius. That's 101 Fahrenheit. What did it say? Brits go loco. I missed it.
I think you did it very well. You did it very well.
Thanks very much. I didn't. I only read half the headline. But anyway, I'll try harder next hour. Let's crack on, though. Susie Boniface and Owen Bennett, as you can see, are here. So a lot of Brexit stories once again on the front pages. You've picked out the Eye to kick off with because we've been hearing from politicians across the Sunday politics shows today, haven't we, talking about what the prospects are for a no deal or not. The Eye suggests that under that scenario, there are issues with food imports. Is that summing it up correctly?
Yeah, essentially, one of the big concerns if there is no deal, that customs would grind to a halt and it'd be very difficult to get things up across the channel, and one of the things is food. And it says here that food could be waved through to avoid huge tailbacks on motorways. If food that's coming in isn't being checked, how do we know where it's come from? How do we know what it is? How do we know it might be chlorinated chicken, but no one's actually
telling us? Don't know whether it's horse meat.
We don't know whether it's horse meat, exactly.
And if there's huge delays, there can be other goods which are staying in their lorries or on the dockside for longer than they should be, and if they're not doing checks on it, the fact they have overstayed their amount of time, as it were, then that could mean that things are now being sent without the safety checks. So, you know, they've been saying Brexit means Brexit for 2 years. Actually, Brexit could mean botulism. That wasn't on the ballot paper, was it?
It's almost like these checks exist for a reason. It's almost like we had a system developed which kind of worked, and now we're kind of unpicking it and we're not sure what we're doing.
But you know that Leave supporters will say that this is scaremongering once again, and they will say that this scenario wouldn't necessarily happen because if there was no deal, we would operate under WTO rules and there would be certain checks and balances in place under those rules.
And I would say to them, go and look at the National Audit Office report that came out, I think it was last year, when it looked into the capacity of British customs to deal with a no-deal situation. And it talks about the fact that even the new customs system they want to get ready online by January would not be able to cope with a no-deal situation. We trade on world WTO terms with some countries. We don't trade on that with the EU. It would be a massive change to the customs system of this country if we were suddenly going to have to use exactly the same system. People, the guys that run Dover, the chief executive of Dover, says a couple of minutes delay will lead to miles and miles of tailbacks. This is not Project Fear. This is Project reality. Now, if you want to make the case as to why no deal is still the best thing for this country, you have to accept that this is what people are saying, and you can't just dismiss it as Project Fear. And we know that the Tory hard Brexiteers, Steve Baker, former Brexit Minister, said it this week, we will vote down a deal that we don't like. The current Chequers deal will not get through the House of Commons. We are heading to no deal at the moment, and I think people really need to start realising that.
Do you think that's right? Do you think that no deal is looking increasingly like the most likely scenario?
Well, look, we had a vote on our relationship with Europe that was called by the Prime Minister of a party that was having some problems within that party having an agreement within Europe himself on their own part of the political spectrum. And they haven't been able to agree on Europe for 40 years. He thought a referendum, throw it open to the people, might settle it once and for all. And he bailed as soon as he realised what the answer was, because fundamentally we've then given the problem of Brexit and negotiating it to that same party, which hasn't agreed for 4 decades, and in the last 2 years they still can't agree, even amongst themselves. They've been arguing solidly for 2 years, down at Chequers and everything else. The people who are the principal architects of this are one at a time jumping ship and saying it's nothing to do with me, Gov. And we're now in a situation where we're 8 months out from March 29th, when some bright spark put in a deadline to this that we didn't have to have, but put in a deadline that says we have to go. And if you suddenly go with no deal, under WTO rules, the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and everyone was saying, oh, we can trade, it'll be fine, we'll trade under WTO with other countries. The problem with that is, under WTO rules, you have to have hard borders. That's Northern Ireland, absolutely screwed under WTO rules. Under WTO rules, you have to have tariffs imposed, and your goods will have tariffs imposed when they go elsewhere. That's huge delays at the borders, and it's huge traffic and port problems. And it may well be that that's temporary, to look at things from the Brexit point of view, that it's a short-term issue with supply chains, and 6 months down the road things could get sorted out a little bit better and people find other suppliers or ways around the problem. But you're going to have a very difficult period before you get to that.
And again, those Brexiteers that you were talking about will suggest that there won't be that problem, because it's in the EU's interest as well to make sure that there isn't that kind of issue.
It's in their interest to punish us as hard as possible, because they don't want the rest of the bloc to leave as well.
The point that they would make.
But they can find somewhere else to get the things that they get from Britain, as great products, as Donald Trump would call it.
I think that is a good point, and that's what Brexiteers are hoping, will sort of prevail with Brussels. I think what the Brexiteers need to do now is they need to put together what would they do. Give us your plan. Give us, if you were in the room with Michel Barnier and Jean-Claude Juncker and Angela Merkel, what would you do? We still haven't seen that. We've had hints of it. Boris Johnson hinted this week in his resignation statement about a new customs system in the border with Ireland, which him and David Davis suggested, which was not back. There was, again, no detail. Give us some detail. OK, Steve Baker, you're going to vote down the deal? What deal would you want to be Parliament then?
OK, let's rattle through some of the other front pages, shall we? Because the Financial Times
this is a doozy.
On issues affecting the city to do with Brexit.
Yeah.
What did you say?
It's a doozy. I'd just like to read a small bit out to the Sky viewer. The UK has acknowledged that it would lose its single market passport, and Chancellor Philip Hammond scrapped a more ambitious mutual recognition plan, but said the city would seek a better deal than the EU's existing equivalence model.
Keeping this in mind, would you vote Leave or Remain in the referendum?
Now, none of us probably. I don't assume, but I know from speaking to Owen, we have no idea what this is about. And Owen, in particular, spends his life looking at Brexit details and trying to figure out city passporting. And most Leave or Remain voters at home are going to think, well, city passporting, financial deals, how does that bother me? I don't really care. They'll find some way around it. It'll be OK. If the city cannot trade in the way that it does now, and it's a massive part of our economy, if it cannot trade in the way that it does now, that affects your pension. It affects your state pension, because those funds are invested as well. It affects your mortgage. It affects the mortgage of your landlord if you're renting, and therefore how much rent he's going to charge you. It affects your interest rate, a credit card, your loan payments on your car. What the city can and can't do affects every single person in this country. And never mind the price of food and everything else. And the fact is that they can't agree. There is no deal for this yet. And again, if you crash out with no deal, the city's screw-a-roonied. And we'll have commodity bankers in pink trousers running wild in the streets.
OK, well, let's move on, if we can. Let's have a word on that, to the Metro page 5, because this is the new Brexit secretary there, who, again, was being interviewed by Andrew Marr today. And he would say that we're still in negotiations. He's confident that a deal can be done by October.
Yes, and one of the things he talked up today was that they're preparing for no deal, and he was asked about, are you planning to stockpile food? And he said, I don't want to get into that kind of stuff. I think it's completely right that you prepare for no deal. I think you have to prepare for the worst outcome. You can't negotiate unless you've got a good backup plan. So I totally agree with Theresa May's a bad deal, no deal is better than a bad deal. I kind of agree with the logic of that. You need to have that mentality. We won't pay the EU bill if no trade deals, the reference to the kind of divorce payment. I mean, I assumed that anyway, because I thought the EU's mantra was nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. If they don't get the trade deal, the withdrawal agreement falls, they don't get the money. But what also falls with that? Everything they've said about EU citizens' rights in this country. Every offer the government have made to EU citizens in this country is predicated on us getting a trade deal. They have not said what they would do to EU citizens in this country if we don't get a deal. I think that is terrifying.
But did you think that the idea of going to the EU and saying we won't pay the Brexit bill if we don't get a deal is a good one?
The government's position on the no-deal thing is completely unsustainable. On the one hand, Owen's right, in a negotiation, for anything, you need to be able to say, well, we'll just walk away and stuff you all. But on the other, he's got to say at home, the government has to say at home, there's no need to panic, there will be a deal. And you can't argue there will be no deal again and use that to ramp up your threat to the car salesman. If you don't get a deal, we're off. At the same time, downplaying that threat at home and saying, oh, no deal's not a problem. Because they can hear each other. You know, that's the fundamental problem. So, you know, if they weren't speaking to each other, it'd be fine. But you can't do both. And there has to come a point, as we're getting closer and closer to this crunch period now, we're going into the neck of the hourglass, and there's going to come a point where actually the people in government are going to have to start saying exactly what is going to happen. Not we think, not we hope, not we believe, but exactly what has just happened and is going to be what's looking at us in the face.
Well, also, I mean, this takes us on to what happens if a deal is agreed. It then has to go back to Parliament,
Yeah.
and so the question is what politicians will do. And that kind of takes us on to the front page of the Telegraph and how different politicians are positioning themselves, because also they're mindful of how this is playing with the public too. Here on the front page of the Telegraph, Sir Vince Cable, they're saying in secret talks to set up a new anti-Brexit political party, presumably feeling that there's a gap in the market there, although the
Lib Dems are currently the only anti-Brexit party, or one of the main principal three parties anyway, that's anti-Brexit, and he's the man who's in charge of it.
He's the man who didn't attend a vote, which could have helped reach his political goal of
admitted
Brexit.
was a mistake.
Yeah, by going to a dinner. Tim Farron also missed it because he was off talking about gay sex again. So I think that, you know, they are becoming a bit of a joke now, the Lib Dems. And I hate to say that, but I think they are becoming a bit of a joke because they're just not getting themselves sorted. You know, they're missing votes because they're going off about forming a new party, but then they don't actually want to be part of a new party. They just want to be at the centre of a new party. It's all very, very odd, isn't it? It's all slightly farcical.
But do you think that there is a demand for some new political movement, maybe at either extreme, given that there's a complete impasse politically over Brexit?
Well, I think Remainers would very much like a party that they could vote for with a chance of winning that is also going to be Remain, because there's 16 million people there with their votes going begging. The people who are pro-Brexit and think the Tories are letting them down would like a party that, again, could do what they wanted for their 17 million. But you've got, you know, when you've got these huge numbers of people involved, they all voted the way they voted for different reasons. Some people voted Leave and wanted to stay in the single market and the customs union and not change anything too much. Other people voted Leave because they want out completely. So you end up with lots of different parties all doing different things, and no one would actually win, and we'd end up with Theresa May again. So.
Well, yeah, so what do you think? I mean, there's been more talk, hasn't there, about a second people's vote, if you like, or some kind of second referendum or another general election. Do you think that scenario is a possibility, either of those come the autumn?
I think the general election is more likely than another referendum, because another referendum you have to get an act through Parliament, all that kind of stuff. I think another general election is more likely, but you know what? The public don't tend to do what you want them to do. You could call another general election saying this is about Brexit, which is kind of what Theresa May did last year, and guess what? The vote wasn't about Brexit, it was about social care and it was about not be happy with the system, all that kind of stuff. So a general election could lead us right back to where we are. Theresa May could... I mean, she's probably desperate to get a number 10, but she just can't go at the moment because no one's doing anything to help her leave. So.
Okay.
The fact is that it's just so difficult and they are so incapable of any party of organising this. There's going to be a point at which they want to throw it back to the people and say, this was your big idea, and absolve themselves of responsibility for what happens next. So I do think there's going to be a second vote of some sort, and they might have to extend the vote past March 29th to get it done another way. But they won't ever accept responsibility for it themselves.
OK.